Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I'm Kat Hobson, your host, and I'm so glad that you're here. Yes, I do know it's Super Bowl Sunday, but my team's not playing, so we're doing a show. Actually, I do have a favorite, but I'm not going there because, I like y'all liking me. But I have to tell you that the show tonight is going to be fascinating. The book was fascinating to me, and I only read one. There's 2 others I have to go through. But the first one that I chose was Dancing with the Mountains, Alzheimer's, Angels, and the Appalachian Trail. It's written by tonight's guest, Paul Travers. You can find more information about him at www.paultravers.com. It's really, he says it's a journey of the spirit in his title, and it really is. A lot of y'all know that Alzheimer's is something that is near and dear to my heart. The topic, the patients, and the care necessary. Well, Paul and his dad had always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail and did not do it before Alzheimer's interfered with his dreams. So Paul decided to hike it for both of them. And the story that has come from that is beautiful, poignant, and just astonishing. I think it's one of the best books I've read in a long time, and it's well written. And when you're writing an emotional, personal book like that, it's not always. So, one of the things that I found interesting was that on the course of his hike, and by the way, the hike was Herm's hike. Herm is his dad, Herman. And he had all kinds of experiences, including outwitting the FBI. So maybe he'll tell us about that. And maybe he won't. I don't know if I would really want to talk about that. But I have to say, Paul, that I am so glad you're here. Welcome to Fate Magazine Radio.
Thank you. It is indeed my pleasure to be here tonight and talk about various aspects of this book and the spiritual and supernatural side of, encounters with nature.
Well, there were a lot of them through here. And I have to say, the fact that you didn't encounter a black bear until you were both just on a path alone, face to face, was pretty amazing to me, because I have been in the Cherokee National Forest, and they are legion. And you weren't even in that area any longer. You were almost through. So I was very surprised it took that long, but it sounded like you dealt with it, and we'll tell people about that. I think that this is probably my favorite book about families battling Alzheimer's. And I've read a few. It was positive. What you were doing was positive. And, was this your dream before your dad became influenced by the Alzheimer's, or was it something that your dad had just wanted to do?
It was something that was always in the back of my mind, because at the beginning of the book I talk about when I was around 8 or 9 years old. My father and I were at Patapsco State Park outside of Baltimore, and we were just there for the day. It was just me and him. I have an older sister, younger brother, so it was like father-son time. And we hiked around a little bit, or walked around a little bit. And then we got back. My father said to me, he said, one day we're going to hike the Appalachian Trail. And here I was, just, 9-year-old. That impressed the heck out of me. I didn't know what that. I knew nothing about the Appalachian Trail, but I was a big, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett fan. And I thought, wow, that sounds, Patapsco State Park, the Appalachian Trail, it sounds like the wilderness. And that hit me like a thunderbolt. And then years later, and here's ironic, when I got out of the service, I actually worked at Patapsco State Park as a park ranger for a number of years.
I found that interesting too.
It was kind of like returning to my roots. And then when I left the Park Service because family came along, and I guess I came at the wrong time. They had hired a number of people before me. There was very little chance of me moving up to any type of management position. So a family comes along. I went with the federal government, took a job down at Fort Meade, Maryland, with an agency that granted security clearances. So I was there for almost 30 years. So this was about, maybe 2 years before I retired. I was cleaning out my desk, and I had this folder of old magazine newspaper articles that I had collected over the years. And one of them was on the Appalachian Trail. And I picked this thing up, and it was from probably the mid-'80s, really before the computer age. And it was like a question and answer column. Somebody said, I want to hike the Appalachian Trail. What did I do? And then the columnist responded, well, you need to visit the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, go to your local library, get some books out. And at that point in time, I went home and I said to my wife, I said, that's what I got to do. I said, I got to hike the Appalachian Trail. I said, and if I tie this in as a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association, I said, that's perfect. I said,
Absolutely.
me and my father will finally hike the trail together. And that was the genesis of my hike.
Well, as I was reading how you got started with this, there's a lot of groundwork that went into it. And it was so amazing that Kathy was a full partner in this, getting it, getting ready to go. Y'all did all the work, the research, the physical preparation as much as you could, because it's quite grueling. And, the support that you offered each other going through there. I know that she wasn't able to go as far as she had planned on the first leg, but how wonderful that she was able to be there and wanted to be. I think that's beautiful.
Because when we talked about this, she was really a caretaker for my father, who at this point in time when we started was a late stage Alzheimer's patient, and also for my mother, who was suffering from cancer. So her intention was not to be a through hiker. She wanted to hike, say, the first 100 miles and the last 100 miles just to support me, support my family, and be a part of Herm's hike. And she really was the glue that held this thing together. And, I just can't say enough, about her determination. She had the grit. She was a true hiker.
Well, she did have the grit. I mean, she stepped right out there with you, and away y'all went.
Because when she got off the trail after about the first week and a half, maybe second week, and because her hip was bothering her, because we had pushed some big mile days, which we shouldn't have due to the weather.
Right.
And I, and I said to her, she was really depressed because she felt, that she wasn't holding up her end of the hike. And I said, no, I said, look, I said, you didn't quit. I said, the mountains told you to go home, right?
Well, it did.
For whatever reason. And then later on, when I got hurt back in August, the words were kind of prophetic, because that's what she said to me. She said, you didn't quit. She said, the mountain told you to go home because there was other things that needed to be taken care of.
See, that's, working as a support system is just so beautiful. Just my opinion.
Because I want readers, I want this book to be a healing tool, for families that are dealing, say, with Alzheimer's or any kind of these debilitating diseases. That there's hope. Your family members, your friends, don't be afraid to reach out to them, because they want to reach out to you and give you a guiding hand along the way.
Absolutely. It's what teamwork is, and families are teams.
Exactly.
There's a reason teamwork makes the dream work, is a saying.
Oh, I like that. I think I'm going to jot that down.
I wish I could claim it, but it's not mine. But it does fit in familial situations. You have to work for it to achieve the dream. So, absolutely. It actually, it's been around for a while, but I got it from HGTV. And it's a mother-daughter team that does renovations in Indianapolis. So I heard it there, and I just started using it, and you're right. It's fact. It is what it is. But you got support from all kinds of unexpected places on the trail. I think that the getting there, getting ready and getting there was so strenuous. Once y'all actually started your hike, I loved the story about the sleeping bags too, by the way. We'll let you tell that. But because you did get suckered into that, I thought that was fantastic. I think that once you started, and I know that it was hard on Kathy too, but what was the thing that surprised you most as far as the physicality or the toughness of the work that you were putting in to get those miles in?
When we started training, I'd say about 6 months ahead of time. And we did the Maryland section of the Appalachian Trail, which people said, well, that's the easiest section on the whole trail. And, you know, we looked at each other and said, oh, my gosh, this is
I don't think there's an easy section on that
There's
trail.
not. We're thinking, what are we getting into? So we trained at local state parks. A couple times we went to the Appalachian Trail in Maryland, which was just about an hour and a half from my home. I live north of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. So we put in what we thought was adequate training because people said, experienced trail hikers said, just get yourself in reasonable shape. And once you're on the trail, then you'll be able to hike yourself in shape. And that was a true mantra. But it's deceiving because when we started at Springer Mountain, Georgia, a lot of mountains in Georgia.
There are.
Yeah, a lot of what they call PUDs, pointless ups and downs. We'd come from a ridge line, down to a gap, right back up again, up and down, and that was probably not only physically demanding, but after a while it got to be mentally demanding. Yes. And then once Kathy went home and I continued on a hike, and by the time I got halfway done, which was some near Maryland or southern Pennsylvania, I was in hiking shape. I could hike 20 miles plus a day, but what was grinding was the mental aspect of it. Every day getting up, packing up your tent, fixing breakfast, throwing on the backpack, and your full-time job was hiking on the Appalachian Trail.
Yes, I saw several times where you mentioned that, you were going to work.
Yes, but it was the people and the stories that I found on the trail. That's what really kept me going. It was like, well, okay, nothing happened this day. It was a hard grinding day, but tomorrow I'm going to meet somebody on the trail that has a story for me. And that's really the way it worked out throughout the whole hike.
Something, and this was farther into your trail, but into your hike, but I'm going to mention it after we come back from break because we've got to go to break. I just looked up. But we will do that. Go ahead and get that out of the way. And we'll be right back. Thank y'all so much for listening because, this is cool stuff. And you just wouldn't believe some of the things that were not normal. So obviously para, right? But we'll be right back. Y'all come back too. And thanks for being here.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Kat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? You see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Paranormal Experienced, and I am so glad that you are here. Yeah, my guest, Paul Travers, and you can find his information at www.paultravers.com. I suggest you go look because it is a great webpage. And, in his book, Dancing with the Mountains, Alzheimer's, Angels, and the Appalachian Trail, it will take you aback some of the experiences that Paul had there. And, Paul, I had mentioned that I was going to be going back to my question, and I actually lost track of things because we were talking, and I always tell people that one day somebody's going to record what we say during those breaks, but it's not going to be me because I like having people come on and talk to me. But it's so interesting because I had mentioned one experience that you had that was obviously supernatural, and you brought up your first experience on the trail that was obviously supernatural. And could you share that experience because it was so out of place, out of time. The person should not have been there in the attire they were in, but you were in so much trouble.
I was in a
dire
state of almost total exhaustion, physical,
yes,
mental, and spiritual. I had, well, the story backs up 2 days earlier when I reached the Fontana Dam with a group of hikers, and I called home and spoke to my wife, Kathy. And the first thing she said, "You got to come home." And I said, "What do you mean you got to come home?" She said, "The FBI was here." She said, "They're looking for you." She said, "They have you listed as a possible domestic terrorist." She said, "They wanted to search the house. They're looking for weapons, chemicals, any bomb-making materials." And when she said that, I knew exactly what it was because I was involved in a whistleblower case against the agency where I worked at down at Fort Meade. Now, I was a civilian employee, and I was retiring. I remember that was on what they call terminal leave, and it was over finances. So I signed on with this investigative petition, thinking that, well, no one's going to, I'm safe. I'm retiring. Boy, that didn't happen. So
yeah, that was not the case.
I had to get to Gatlinburg and get home. So I tried to get a ride, couldn't get a ride. It was 40 miles through, the national park. And I thought, oh, man.
Yeah, because you were in Cherokee National Park at that time.
If we were in the Smoky Mountains.
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay. Not realizing how difficult hiking in the mountains there was going to be. So I thought, well, I'll push 2 days. I pushed 20 miles the first day. And the weather was kind of iffy. The weather was closing. And the second day, it started to rain. It got cold. Then it started sleeting. Then it started snowing. And I got to the last shelter before you hike up to Klingman's Dome, the highest point on the Appalachian Trail. And there was all these people huddled in the shelter. And I said, anybody going up to the dome? And they said, no, we're hunkering down here. We're going to go up there tomorrow when the weather clears. They said, why don't you spend the night? I said, I got to get home, family emergency. So that's when I started hiking up to the top of Klingman's Dome. So I had about 2 miles to go, and it's already getting near 4 o'clock. And, there's no sunshine. I mean, the gray clouds were swirling, and then it started, spitting snow. And I'm thinking, and I was exhausted. I had this Gore-Tex jacket on, but still I'm sweating through the jacket. So I would hike a couple hundred yards. I would sit down and be in the old altar boy. I'd be saying, God, here I am, need some help here, and I'd get up a couple hundred more yards. I'd sit down on the trail and I'm thinking, I'm still here. I'm waiting. Third time I did it, I'm just like crying out, and I'm a voice in the wilderness, really. So I'm just laying there thinking, oh man, I was afraid of hypothermia because I was starting to doze off. And then I hear these rocks like screed tumbling, because I would sit almost right on the trail. And I thought, oh my goodness. I said, I hope it's a deer and not a bear. And I look up and I see this leg. And I look up and it was a young man, looked to be in his 20s, and he had long athletic running pants. He had a long sleeve shirt, and that was it. And he had running trail shoes. And he says, I heard you're from above. And I'm like, and I was kind of embarrassed, to be honest with you, because, here I am. It was a Sunday and I'm calling out to the Lord for some help. And this guy, he appears out of nowhere.
Well, you asked for him.
So he's going to me. He says, you're almost there. Just put one foot in front of the other. And he said, have faith in yourself. He said, you'll be fine. Everything is going to work out. And at the time I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm listening to this guy. And then I made a comment like, oh yeah, he was saying, don't stay in one place too long. And I said, yeah, this is what I need. Faith for the fatigue, right? And then, so this guy, he bounds down the trail, right? He disappears because the fog was really closing in. So this guy, he disappears into the fog. And I'm thinking, like, what the heck just happened? I haven't seen anybody all day. And this guy comes down, tells me, hey, everything's going to be all right. You're almost at the top, and disappears in the fog. So I had my backpack off. I start running after him. And I just kind of shouted into the fog. I said, where are you headed? Into this white void. And then there was no reply. And then a few seconds later, the reply came, the same place you are. And then I said, where's that? Again, a pause. And he said, home. And the voice just faded out. And I thought, whoa. I didn't tell him I was going home. I didn't say too much to this guy because I was kind of intimidated and embarrassed. And then I hiked up to Klingman's Dome in the fog, got lost, finally found the restroom in the parking lot. And I was ready to spend there the night until this Amish family came and gave me a ride down to Gatlinburg. And then once I got home and cleared this,
which was weird in itself.
Yes, I cleared this up with the FBI, got back on the trail. Now we're in Hot Springs, North Carolina, one of my all-time favorite trail towns. So we're at this little pub. I go into the pub and I see these people that I had met at the last shelter before I hiked up Klingman's Dome.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, I told them about my story, my run-in with the FBI. I was kind of like a countercultural hero to the young kids. And I said, did you guys see anybody? And they said, no. They said, we didn't see anybody until we got up to Klingman's Dome, and we got down to Newfound Gap, which was really a resting place for hikers.
Yes.
It was a big parking lot there. And I thought, geez. And then I looked at all these trail maps, and there was no loop trails or blue blaze trails to get you back in the parking lot at Klingman's Dome. So
there's not, because that's the only part of the Appalachian Trail I've hiked on at all.
so whoever this person was, and I actually, like I said, when we spoke at the break, I said, oh, well, if he wasn't my guardian angel, and that's why I tell people about the guardian angel story that's on the back of the jacket where it says, I met my guardian angel. I said, well, if he wasn't my guardian angel, then he was somebody else's guardian angel that just happened to be lost in the woods and stumbled upon me. And
I don't believe in coincidences, Paul.
That was, it was like, after that happened, it kind of hit home to me that maybe I was really on a spiritual journey of some type, because people had been giving me clues. The people I had met all along, in various trail towns and hostels, they would say, Paul, when you're out there on the trail, you got to connect the dots. That kind of thing. And then I met one gentleman and said, well, as you're going through the trail, he said, you're a stranger in a strange land, move toward the light. Always move toward the light. And then I started piecing this together. And the trail actually became, it was point to point, linear. Mm-hmm. But when I got done and I kind of analyzed my whole trip, it was like a prayer labyrinth.
Yes.
As I walked along at the beginning, it really was a time for reflection, because the one gentleman I first met, he said, Paul, you're going to think every thought you had in your life, he said, at least 10,000 times. and I think it was more than that. So, that was a time to pause for reflection, for remembering your past life. And then I actually moved into a kind of, when I had these experiences, it was kind of revelation. And then when I finally finished the trail, I had a sense of redemption about my life. And, that's why the book came about. When I had finished the trail, I had no intentions of writing a book. And then I was telling people about my experiences, whether it be with the Alzheimer's people that I met along the way, some of the trail people I met, some of the townspeople I met, they said, you have a story here. You need to share the story with people. And that's how the book came about.
Well, everything from the trail angels to the other through hikers to the section hikers you ran across, and we can tell people the difference in the hikers. You were just being led, to me it felt like you were being led through the whole experience. Because when you shouldn't have been able to do something, things worked out that you found the physical wherewithal to do it. When you just felt overwhelmed, you found strength. And I love that, you made so many friends as you were going through. It wasn't just in the hostels and the shelters. I mean, just on the trails. You weren't hiking with them, but you were hiking the same way.
Because I was in kind of a unique spot. Because here I was, I was one of the older hikers. 59 years old, pushing 60. And most of the hikers there are anywhere between, early 20, average age, early 20s, probably early 30s. So, you would meet up with different groups of hikers and people would look out for you. But then everybody hikes, they hike your own hike. That's the mantra. Well, people hiked faster than me. So a lot of times I was hiking by myself. So I had the opportunity to meet up with different groups of hikers along the way. And I believe that kind of broadened my experience on the trail, because I would tell the younger hikers, everybody, you get addicted to miles, because once you get into shape, well, I'm doing 20 miles a day. Well, then, maybe I could do 25 miles a day. And I would tell him, slow down. And, the old cliche, smell the roses. I said, the trail experience is not just pounding out miles. I said, it's the people you meet on the trail. I said, the people you meet in the town and the experiences that you have. And that really came full circle for me on my hike.
Well, it did. And I noticed that as you were getting toward the end of your journey, you were actually doing the mileage addiction too. You were pounding out those 20 plus miles a day. And you mentioned there.
I got to the point where comfortably I could do between 20 and 25 miles. And that really wasn't pushing it. You just get into, you get into shape. Because when I fell in Vermont and had to come home, I weighed 156 pounds. I had lost 40 pounds since I first started hiking. And my wife, when I got home, she looked at me and she says, she said, you got the body of a 10-year-old boy. She said, you have no upper muscle mass. And I didn't. And toward the end, I was having trouble keeping weight on. I was having trouble with calories. And, ice cream became my favorite source, my favorite food. Rich in calories, fattening. I couldn't get enough ice cream. But it gives you an idea of how it wore me down. Losing 40 pounds was probably a little too much weight.
That's a lot of weight. And we do have a cacophony of dogs going on here all of a sudden. I apologize for that. But, when you lose that much weight, but you were so hungry all the time.
I told people that if you want to lose weight, an Appalachian Trail through hike is the perfect diet. But the thing is, once you get done, and then it's like your body is craving calories. You go in an eating binge, and then with a few months, I probably gained 20 pounds back, which was good because I had lost way too much weight.
That was way too much weight. What did your physician say when you got home?
Well, my first year on the trail, I got to Vermont, and I fell and separated my shoulder and sprained my knee. And I thought this was going to be a temporary setback. And it wasn't. I stayed up in Rutland, Vermont for a few days, hoping that I could heal. But when it became obvious that I wasn't, and that's when I came home. And then before I started, a couple years before, I had torn labrums in both shoulders.
Oh my gosh.
And when I fell and separated my shoulder, it was like that burning white hot pain. I knew I was seriously injured. And then when I got home,
there's no doubting when that happens.
Yeah, and when I got home, I went to see my doctor, and then I went to see the orthopedic surgeon. And he said, Paul, he said, look, he said, your shoulder's going to bother you. He said, but the real problem is going to be your knee because you also sprained your knee. And he said, I doubt at your age if you can go back to the trail. And I didn't. I tell people I took like 5 months, 0 months instead of 0 days. And when I finally finished in 2010 and got home, and I went to see my doctor for physical and stuff, I couldn't lift my hands above my head because I had suffered multiple tears in the rotator cuff that didn't require surgery, but they required an extended healing time. So yeah, the trail physically, I tell people the mountains are healing for troubled hearts, but they're also hurting. You have to pay attention. You're out in the wilderness. The mountains can kill you.
Absolutely, it can. And the one time when you stepped off into air, you were so fortunate.
Yes, because it's so easy when you're out there to start daydreaming. You're pushing miles and you're not paying attention. and one false step, you could fall off the mountain. Or in my case, I almost, I stepped off the cliff, and luckily was able to grab a tree branch that swung me back, to solid rock. And it was like, Paul, you got to wake up. You got to pay it to you. You can't lull yourself into this false sense of security.
Well, it's easy to do, right? Because you've been doing it. You're focused on the view in front of you. I can see that happening.
Very, very easily, because you start thinking about, well, the things that happened, in the past on your trail, in your past life, and then you think about the next shelter coming up, or the next trail town, or meeting up with a group of people, and your mind starts to wander. And that can be good in that it can kill some time for you, but it can be bad, and it might kill you if you're not paying attention to where your next step is going.
I have been up over a gorge before, and in the Smoky Mountains outside of Cherokee, and it is something that you can just get lost in. And if you're not paying attention, you'll find yourself stepping towards it to look further down or something, and it really is a danger. Sometimes the beauty is dangerous. It can mesmerize you.
Especially so when I got to New England, because once you hit the White Mountains, to me, they were my Himalaya mountains. They were my Mount Everest, and the mountains were bigger, more difficult, where you really had to pay attention, because if you didn't, you could easily fall and sustain a serious injury.
Well, I'm glad you didn't, although you did have some pretty bizarre experiences with that. I mean, you had some very interesting experiences. Was a lot of the trail through the areas that you went, was it rocky or was it pebbly, or what seemed to be the most dangerous? And I ask you this as we get ready to go into another break. My apologies. But
it depends on what section you were hiking. Down south, you had big mountains, but it wasn't as rocky. You got to the mid-Atlantic, and once you got, say, to Connecticut, especially Vermont, you could see the transition to, the White Mountains. And that's when you knew, this was the big league of mountains, because it was steep, it was rocky. You were up on the ridgeline more, you were above the tree line a lot more, which was fantastic hiking.
No doubt.
You had to be aware of where you are, and the weather coming in, where the shelters were, and you had to be thinking, well, if the storm comes on me, what am I going to do? Where can I seek shelter? That kind of thing. You had to be more aware of your surroundings once you got to New England, because they said once you hit New England, you have done 80% of the miles, but you've only did 20% of the work.
Wow.
Like, no, it can't be.
That is saying something, Paul. Well, let's go take this break, and you can tell us some more about that, because good heavens, I know how much work there was involved. But we'll be right back after this. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate magazine, and I am so glad you're here with my fantastic guest, Paul Travers. And you can find his website at www.paultravers.com, and you'll find information about all of his books. You'll find information about his background and what matters to him, all the good things. You'll know a lot more about him than you do now, although this conversation will get us there. I'm so glad that we are back, and I had asked you about the terrain, and you had said that the end was the most work. Was it really?
Especially Maine, right? Because the mantra was when I started down in Springer Mountain, Georgia, was no rain, no pain, no Maine. But we had plenty of rain because it rained 44 the first 60 days on the trail, right? But once we got up, I got into Maine, it was, Maine was a true wilderness. There was a section there, the 100-mile wilderness, where the only thing you had access to was logging roads. So basically for 100 miles, you had no resupply points. But by then,
Oh, that's serious.
Yeah,
Wow.
you were a seasoned hiker, you knew you were getting into, because, they at the sign of the wilderness, they were promoting how dangerous it could be. And people get out there and they're not experienced and they run into trouble. But I always tried, I tried to pace myself throughout the hike. Where you find a shelter, you find a hostel, and I think that's what really people don't take that into consideration. I realized I wasn't Superman out there.
Right.
So and I had just come back from an injury, and then here it was. We get to the Mahoosic Notch at the start of Maine, which is billed as the toughest mile on the Appalachian Trail. So I came down one side, down to this notch, and it was about 1,000-foot drop over a mile, which is very steep. So coming down there, I'm very careful. And what happens, I slipped on some scree, and I fell backwards. I bent my hiking pole, and then I felt my knees ankle go snap, crackle, and pop in my boot.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my goodness. So I get down to the bottom, the beginning, the toughest mile on the trail. And indeed, it was the toughest mile, because you had to climb over and under boulders the size of, Mack trucks. And literally you had to crawl, you had to push your backpack through certain sections and crawl. And that took me over 2 hours to get through this 1 mile.
Oh, gosh.
But the real challenge was, once you got through this section in this gorge or ravine, you had to go up another 1,000 feet in a mile. And I thought, I think that may have been tougher than actually doing the mile on the Mahoosic Notch. And I thought, how am I going to get up here? And the key to it was, all you had to do was look on the side of the trail, and a lot of it was steep rock that I was unable to scramble up. But if you looked on the side of the trail, you could see the trees where the tree branches were bent, or where the bark was kind of peeled off from people grabbing onto the trees and pulling themselves up on the trail.
Wow. That's intense.
That's pretty tough. That was pretty intense.
You had to be tripping out when you first saw how all of that, because you'd already fallen, you were already hurt, and then you're looking at other people's efforts, the remains and signs of their efforts. That's just wild and had to be freaky.
But I was, and I thought, oh my God, I finally took my boot off, and I have a picture of my ankle in the book.
Yes, you do. Oh my gosh.
But the picture doesn't do justice because, not only was it grossly swollen, it was, that kind of purplish yellow tint to the whole ankle. And I thought, but after a few days of recuperating, I was able to go back and hike again.
Could you get your boot? How did you get out of there once you took your boot off?
It was 2 days before I got into a town with a hostel.
I thought
so
it
while
was
we're up in
closer.
the mountains, I would soak my foot in every mountain stream I came to. And I think that helped keep some of the swelling down.
Well, sure.
But once I got into town, it was, oh boy, people going, you're going to have to go home. I said, no. I said, I'm not going home. I said, this is my chronically bad ankle since I've been 20 years old. I said, I roll it and it looks like this. I said, in a few days, I said, I'll be fine. So then I teamed up with this hiker named Squeeze Cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And we did some slack packing, which was, you just backpack with a day or hike with a day pack. And then you get to a finishing point and, someone will pick you up and bring you back to where you started. So it was easy to put on a number of big miles with that day pack versus, 30 pounds of the backpack. So that's what we did for a few days while I was healing. And that really seemed to work quite well.
Well, it got your ankle back in motion too. So I just thought that was such a bad injury. And I just did not realize that you were still 2 days out from getting back into a location, a town.
Because that's, once you get probably up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, you have to consider if you get hurt, it's going to be a while before somebody can get to you or before you can get the help.
Yes. And were the White Mountains the hardest mountains, period?
No, I actually thought the mountains in Maine were harder. Maybe because I was kind of running on empty, looking forward to finishing the hike. I found the White Mountains exhilarating. It was like,
I would think that too.
Ever since I started the Springer Mountain, I looked to the White Mountains as kind of, this was my goal, to get to the White Mountains, to be hiking above the ridge line, to experience that kind of hiking. And the mountain scenery was breathtaking. It was just, and I had good weather.
Well, that helped, right?
For most, yeah, which was, I guess I knock on wood, keep my fingers crossed. When I was up in New Hampshire and Maine, for the most part, I had pretty good weather to hike the mountains. So yeah, I think another guardian angel may have been looking out for me.
Well, certainly you were being watched over. Actually, you're being watched over the whole way through. So
I actually believe. Do we have time for another story before we go to the break, or
we do? You got 6 minutes.
Okay. When I got hurt in August of 2009, recuperated. I wasn't sure I was going to go back.
Right.
I had thought, well, at that point, I'd raised over $5,000 for the Alzheimer's Association. I thought that's not bad, because people say, well, you got to go back. And they don't know, as I said before, how much the mountains hurt. I was kind of mentally fatigued, not only physically hurt, mentally fatigued. And then my wife and my mother, because my father had passed away that November.
Yes.
So I thought, you know. And then my mother said to me, she said, you know, it's no longer Herm's hike. It's no longer for your father. She said, do this for yourself. So back in March of 2010, we had a couple nice spring light days. So I said to my wife, Kathy, I said, I got to go back. And she said, you should go back. And so that's what I did. You know, I went back to the trail. And then darn if I didn't almost get hurt again.
You were just walking the edge, man.
Like, please.
You know, one of the things that I found the most poignant, and I know that you found 2 different Field of Dreams while you were on your journey, but I just loved when you went to visit your dad, and the connection that you found was baseball. You know, just 2 guys watching a game.
That was probably one of the most emotionally memorable experiences that I had, because I had planned to get to Maryland in June. Like I said, I only lived about an hour and a half from the trail. So I was home for Father's Day and went to visit my father at the nursing home. And when I walked in there, and I hadn't seen him now since end of March. And when I walked in there, he was sitting there with my mother by his side, and my mother's holding his hand. And my sister and her family, some family members were there. And when I walked in the room, my father, he looks up at me. And he's looking. And then on the poster board, we had pictures of the family to keep him connected to the family. So he's looking at me. Then he glances up and looks at these pictures on this cork board. And he looks back at me, and he goes to me. He says, "Yeah." He says, "You know, you're quite a handsome fellow there." And he's looking back.
You look like him.
and then my mother's holding his hand, and he looks toward my mother, and he thinks he's whispering, but he's not. And he's going to my mother, "You know, that guy there, he looks a lot like me." And everybody in the room shouts, "He should look like you. He's your son." And my father, he did not know my name at that time.
Right.
But that's one of those, like I said, you know, with Alzheimer's patients, you're panning for gold, and maybe you'll find a little bit of gold nugget. That was the gold nugget that I found. So briefly, we had that connection there. And then I stayed with him, and we watched the baseball game. And he had the eyes of a blind man. I couldn't tell if he could see or not.
Right.
So we're sitting there watching the game, and all of a sudden there was a close play at first base, and my father goes, and he could barely speak. He goes, "Oh," he said, "that was close." And I'm looking at him, and I think, does he really see this?
Yeah, right.
And then I just sat there with him, held his hand until he fell asleep, and then I left the room. But that was probably, I mean, when I look back on that moment brought tears to my eyes. It was probably one of the most memorable events that I had on the trail. And the trail extended from Washington Monument State Park all the way to the Genesis Nursing Home, which was in Townsend, Maryland, just down the road from me. So, like I said, for me, the Appalachian Trail hike wasn't point to point. It was kind of a circle route.
Yes. And I'm so glad you had that moment. That mattered so much.
Because I tell people that are experienced Alzheimer's or families, you cherish these moments. They're there,
They are.
Don't worry that, your loved one doesn't know who you are. They know who you are. There'll be a spark somewhere,
They will.
That there's recognition there. And until the day my father died, and I was always thankful for this, to whatever higher power there is, whenever my mother walked in the room, his face lit up like a 5-year-old on Christmas Day.
Ah.
Because at the very end, my father could not talk. He could not eat.
Yeah.
He ate like a little bird, and his body was shutting down, and eventually, his body just stopped breathing. But whenever my mother walked in the room, he would just like try to hold his arms up for a hug. And boy, was that an emotional moment. I'm sitting here with goosebumps. That's what a moment it was. I was always thankful for that. I wasn't worried about my father didn't know me.
He knew the love of his life, though. Absolutely. Well, we do have to go to break. I'm so glad you shared that part because that matters. And we'll be back after this. Y'all come back too. And you know what I always say? Maybe we'll find a little good news today, right? I'm ever hopeful. See you on the flip side.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is defending calls to evacuate the U.S. Embassy in the Ukrainian capital, saying the threat of a Russian invasion justifies the action. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from the western city of Lviv, where the U.S. is moving some staff and consular services.
Lviv is a short drive away from Poland, a NATO country. It's home to many expatriates, including Americans. The State Department says staff in Lviv are there to help Americans get out of Ukraine. More than a dozen countries, including the U.S., have urged their citizens to leave Ukraine as soon as possible. It's another signal that Ukrainians must stand on their own, says Lieutenant Colonel Valery Kurkov, chief of Lviv's Territorial Defense Unit. Our international partners can do as they wish, as long as they do not harm us, he says. We will be keeping a cool head, and we will not fall victim to panic. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Lviv.
Some Afghan Americans are objecting to President Biden's plans to seize Afghan money held in the U.S., saying this decision will worsen an already deadly economic crisis in Afghanistan. Annalise Finley from member station KQED has more.
The Biden administration signed an order last week to take and redistribute $7 billion of Afghan funds held in U.S. banks. The money was originally frozen when the Taliban took control of the country this summer. Shbozmi Nasiri is an Afghan-American immigration lawyer in the San Francisco Bay Area. She says taking the money will further destabilize the country's economy.
It really hit home, and I felt like the Afghan people are being robbed over and over and over again. This is sort of like the last punch in the gut.
The Biden administration says it's hoping to reserve half the money for humanitarian aid to help the Afghan people. For NPR News, I'm Annalise Finney.
The presidential candidate from France's mainstream conservative party held her first big rally today. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley has more.
Chanting Pécresse, Président! 8,000 supporters of Valérie Pécresse cheered her on at the Zenith Concert Hall in Paris. For the first time, one of France's two mainstream parties has put forth a female candidate for president.
Je donnerai la parole au peuple de France.
Pécresse portrayed Macron as an opportunist with no political roots. The 55-year-old served as minister under former President Nicolas Sarkozy. She is currently president of the country's most populous region, Île-de-France, which includes Paris. These supporters say she has the experience and temperament to make a great president. Pécresse is currently behind Macron and far-right candidate Marine Le Pen in the polls. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
And you're listening to NPR News. Democratic Senator Ben Ray Lohan, who's recovering from a stroke, says he plans to be back at work in the Senate in a few weeks so he can vote on President Biden's upcoming nominee for the Supreme Court. In a video released today by his office, the 49-year-old New Mexico senator says he's doing well and is strong and looks forward to being back in the Senate after making a full recovery. He had surgery to relieve pressure on his brain after the stroke. Speed skater Erin Jackson has won a gold medal for the U.S. in the women's 500-meter race. As NPR's Joe Hernandez reports, she becomes the first black woman to medal in speed skating at a Winter Olympics.
The last time an American woman took home the top prize in 500-meter speed skating was 1994. Jackson, who's 29, finished the event with a time of 37.04 seconds and says winning the gold was amazing and that she was happy to take home the top prize after a tough few years. The victory almost didn't happen. Jackson didn't qualify for the event, but her teammate Brittany Bowe gave up her own spot in the race, saying she'd have a better chance medaling in other events and that Jackson deserved to compete. Bowe was ultimately able to race in the 500-meter after all, following a reallocation of positions, and came in 16th. Joe Hernandez, NPR News.
U.S. futures contracts are trading higher at this hour. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 futures are up about 0.2%. NASDAQ futures are up about 0.1%. Crude oil futures up 1.5% at $94.44 a barrel. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News.
There are millions of books out there just waiting for you. But how to keep up? Introducing NPR's Book of the Day. Every weekday, we feature some of our favorite conversations with authors and writers about their latest books. You can check it out in about the time it takes to walk the dog. Happy reading.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I am Kat Hobson, your host, or as my friend Rick likes to say, the voice of Fate. I'll take it. Now, before we get started again, I just wanted to let y'all know that if you have not visited fatemag.com in a little while, you're missing out. We have got trading cards, we have got t-shirts. I believe I saw hoodies up there last time I checked. We have had so many. Well, you got to figure since 1948, there have been a few editions, right? So we actually have uncirculated copies if you need to fill out your collection. I cannot tell you the number of people that email me or message me on Facebook and show me their Fate libraries. And I mean all the way from the time of the small to the full-size magazine print back down to the small and the species links and all the books and all the things that make Fate so cool. So if you're looking to fill your collection out, like I said, all you have to do is just look on the site, and Phyllis is fantastic. She will assist you with anything you need. So just message. There's a link there to email the editor. So enjoy getting a chance to look at that. Now, I have been so full of questions for our guest tonight, Paul Travers, Travers, if you're going to be looking at this website. You can find him at www.paultravers.com. He has written the book that I have been reading, which is Dancing with the Mountains, Alzheimer's, Angels, and the Appalachian Trail. And he has done such a great job of sharing his experiences with this book. And he also has 2 others that are on that website that you need to check out, because I'm going to tell you, the man writes well. So, Paul, I am so glad that you're here. I enjoyed our first hour. I can't believe that we're already into the second.
Time goes by when we're having fun, right?
Absolutely.
This has been a lot of fun for me. It's a nice walk down memory lane.
Yeah, I've been waiting for almost a month to talk to you about this. And it is, well, not quite a month, but close. And I think that that this is one of the best books I've read in quite some time, as far as personal experiences go, and your willingness to share both the good times and the hardships, and to share some of the bizarre things that you came across too. And I had told you that one of your supernatural or paranormal experiences that just blew me away was something that made you wonder if you had died in your first glitch on your hike. You were still, I believe you were in North Carolina or Tennessee. I want to say Tennessee. But the woman on the trail with the cigarette.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. I had just left Kinkora Hostel, which was run by a gentleman by the name of Bob Peoples, who's kind of a trail legend, one of the nicest gentlemen you ever want to meet. So, you know, by looking at you had your trail companion book, so you can tell, you know, it lists stuff out on the trail. So elevations and all that stuff. So it looked like, you know, I was going to have some decent hiking. I won't say easy hiking, decent hiking. Well, I got back on the trail and I was near Laurel Creek, and the trail went right by Laurel Creek, and it all of a sudden the heavens opened up. Just a wall of water came down, and I had my Gore-Tex jacket on, and I was walking near the creek, and I went to tug on the hood of my jacket because some rainwater was seeping in, and I slipped and I fell into the creek. And, you know, my whole life didn't flash in front of me, but I actually fell in like slow motion.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my goodness, I am in trouble. Now the creek was maybe only running 2.5 feet deep, even with all the rain. So, but I splashed the creek and I fell maybe 6 or 7 feet, and I landed on my backpack. And I think that saved my life, because if I would have fell, and I was by myself at the time, if I would have fell on my side or face forward and hit my head and knocked myself out, I would have drowned. Because when I splashed the creek, my hiking poles went flying in the air, and I had to retrieve them, you know, downriver. And I'm just laying there on my back, on my backpack, and water is just it's rushing over my face, and I'm just laying there for a few seconds. I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't feel any real sharp pain. Maybe I didn't break anything. So what I did, I just turned over and I crawled on all fours to the shoreline after retrieving my hiking poles. And then, you know, I went and just sat on the trail for a few minutes. And luckily, my sleeping bag and personal articles and some clothes were in waterproof bags.
Right.
But you know, everything had that swamp smell to it, you know, from a river or a creek. So I stayed in my wet clothes. I just changed socks, whatever good that did. And then I thought, well, do I want to go back? I was really shook. You know, I was really scared.
Well, sure you were.
And then I walked down the trail a couple miles, and I see this woman. She's in the woods by herself. And she looked to be young, maybe, you know, late teens, early 20s. So she was kind of I would say tall, thin girl. And she had straggly hair, and it's still pouring down rain, Kat. And I'm looking at her, and she's smoking a cigarette
in the rain.
It was like the cigarette man, I guess, in the X-Files or something. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's this? And she has no backpack or nothing. She had like a fleece pullover on. And I could see where, like, you know, like rain's kind of dripping down, and she had glasses. And I went up to her, and I didn't know what to say. And like, I thought, well, maybe I did drown in the creek. That's how scared I was. I was spooked before, but this time I was scared. And I went up to her, and I started going, you know, am I dead? And she looks at me like, well, what the hell's wrong with you? She said, dead what? And I thought, dead lost. And she said, nah. And she says, I'll get you out of here. So she's giving me directions about how to get back to the trail. And I was ever so grateful, right? I know.
Well, you needed somebody.
Yes. So I followed the directions, and I'm walking on this like power line trail, and I think I'm going in a circle. And sure enough, after about 20, 25 minutes, I'm slipping and sliding in the mud. I come back, and I see her. She's still standing in the woods. And I thought, boy, this is as spooky as Klingman's Dome, right?
It was.
I go up to her, and I said, I need help. And she said, you didn't listen to what I told you, did you? I tried. And then I said, do you mind if I asked you a question? I said, what are you doing here in the woods? And she just looks at me, and she says, well, I guess I was waiting for you.
Get out.
I did have the courage to ask her name. and she said her name was Regina. And I have a sister my older sister is named Regina. And my older sister is named for one of my aunts who I never knew, who was a nun with the Franciscan Sisters of St. Joseph. Now, Sister Regina the Nun, she passed away in, I believe it was 1944 time frame, in her early 20s. She was a missionary down in Alabama at the St. Francis School for the Colored. You know, that's what it was back then.
Yes.
And she died from tuberculosis. And the story was that my aunt contracted tuberculosis, and as you know, this is the late 30s, early 40s now. We're in a different time frame, a different era, different attitudes. They brought her back to the Mother House, the convent back in Hamburg, New York, which is just outside of Buffalo, New York. Mm-hmm. And basically she was kept, I'd say, incognito, almost quarantined from her family, which would have been my grandmother, grandfather. So they went up there to see what was going on, and they said, we're taking our daughter to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, which, you know, still world famous hospital. So They took her down to the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and the doctors at Hopkins told her, if you would have brought her in 4 to 6 months earlier, we could have done something. But they said the tuberculosis is too far advanced. We can't do anything. And then she passed away a few months later. And she is buried up at the Catholic cemetery up in Hamburg, where all the nuns are buried. And she is buried to the right of the founder, who was Mother Colette. And nobody seemed to know the story, because if you're buried to the right of somebody, normally in a cemetery, that is a place of honor.
It is.
And you know, the old nuns up there, no one seemed to know the story. So that was my visit, a ghostly visitation. And then it came full circle. My father passed away. I finished the hike. I used to go sit with my mother on Wednesdays. And that guy, Mitch Albom, wrote the book Tuesdays with Maury. Well, I had Wednesdays with Franny because my mother's name was Frances. So we would sit and we would just talk about anything under the sun. We were like two old buddies, two old drinking buddies, right? You know, the adult son with his mother. And we would just talk about the past, anything that came to mind. So one day, and my mother was suffering from multiple myeloma, and she was a very sick woman in a lot of pain. And one day she had pictures, family old pictures, and she had pictures of Sister Regina as a nun back in the early 40s. And she showed me these pictures, and it almost took my breath away because it looked just like the girl I had met in the woods when I had fallen into Laurel Creek.
There you go.
I was like speechless. I didn't say anything to my mother because I thought, well, you know, she doesn't need to know that I almost drowned in the creek. But I looked at the photos, and it kind of took my breath away. I was thinking,
even the glasses.
Pardon?
Even the glasses.
Yes. So, you know, that was my second kind of supernatural experience. I think I got to the point where my spiritual journey actually revealed to me some supernatural events.
I think so too. But you know, that was a powerful one with a familial connection, even though you didn't know it at the time.
No, I did not.
So maybe there had been a chance that you were going to be dead, and she was there to be a guide either way.
I thought about that. I looked at it from both sides, and and then when I finally got done, and I from the people I met with near-death experiences and similar situations, life-threatening situations, that the hereafter, it's not a window or a door, it's a curtain.
Yes, it is.
And I think that, whatever on the other side moves that curtain at times and gives you a peek of what might be behind that curtain.
A veil, if you will.
And I think that was maybe the curtain billowed, you know, the supernatural, whatever cosmic forces on the other side, you know, they produce whatever, you know, vibrations that move this curtain. And I thought
absolutely.
Yeah, and same thing with the gentleman on Klingman's Dome. This woman in the woods.
That was something else. I don't know what Klingman's Dome was, but the woman in the woods was definitely yours. But we have to take a break, so we'll be right back. So y'all come back with us, and we will catch you after this. And I know you're loving this because this is fascinating. Be sure you come back, and we'll see you then.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I'm Kat with my guest tonight, Paul Travers, and we are discussing one of his books. There's 3, so you need to go to his website, www.paultravers.com, and check them out. His dad was in Hawaii in the military on Pearl Harbor Day and survived, obviously, because Paul is here. But it's a good read too. I wanted to finish this before I got to that, because I am fighting for my free time reading. So I am just thrilled to have you here. I think that, Paul, your stories through your Dancing with the Mountains, Alzheimer's, Angels, and the Appalachian Trail, and I know I'm leaving off the last part of that title, and I apologize for that.
A journey of spirit.
Journey of spirit. I wanted to say spiritual journey every time. I'm glad I didn't. But, you know, you certainly did have a journey of spirit. Almost from the get-go, you were having experiences. And I have to ask you, I know that you got your trail name. It wasn't the one that you started out with, but when you were named, it was pretty good. So, do you want to talk about the trail names and some of the people that you met and how you came to have yours?
When you hike, I guess any long distance trail, your trail name is your new moniker, right? Your new identity. So either you pick one for yourself, or normally your fellow hikers assign one to you. So when we started, I like to walk in the rain, so it was Rain Man. And then it was when it rained 44 out of the first 60 days, my fellow hiker said, "Oh no, this is not good." So then I did a rain dance, and it to stop the rain, and it rained more. So I really didn't have a trail name until I got past Hot Springs, North Carolina, which was a couple weeks into the hike, because we had stopped at past Blood Mountain. There was an outfitter there, and there was a group called Susie Miles and the Trail Servants. They were serving cheeseburgers. No greater meal for a hiker. So me and Susie and my wife, we got to talking, and she says, "What's your trail name?" And I said, right now it's just Paul. I said, somebody suggested Paul on the road to Damascus because that was where they have the big trail festival. And I said, I really don't like that. I said, I think it's kind of pretentious down here in the South, you know, where it's kind of like a little bit of the Bible Belt. And she says, "Oh no," she said, "I think that's a tremendous trail name." She says, "You're all on the road to Damascus." And that's when she told me, just connect the dots as you go down the trail. And it was like, whoa. And these dots eventually end up being my cosmic portrait.
Yes.
Okay, so here we are. I'm going down the trail. I still don't have a trail name. So we get out of Hot Springs, and I'm around the campfire one night with these group of younger hikers in their 20s that I had hiked with for a few days. So they're sitting around the campfire, and they're passing around a bottle and stuff. And so I said, it was getting late. I said, "Guys," I said, time to go to bed. And they said, "Whoa, wait a minute, old timer, you can't leave yet." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, we checked you when we were in town. We looked up your website, because I was giving out cards and I had little flyers and stuff to promote the hike. And they said, "We know all about you. The good son doing this to raise money in the name of your dad." They said, "But we don't know what your trail name is." And I said, "Well, I don't have a trail name." So then I told them my story about trail names. So then there was this one, he was probably in his mid-20s. His trail name was Recon, and he had did a couple tours in Iraq. And I think they, he was like the leader of the group. They had a little bit too much to drink, a little bit too much to smoke. They were feeling no pain. So he confers with, it was like, oh gosh, the one gentleman's name was Tree. Big gangly kind of guy. The other group, his name was Flipper because he was a marine biology student. And then Recon's, I guess you could say, his romantic interest at the time, her name was Muffin. And I didn't question whether she was a love muffin or not, right? But this was the group. So he confers with them, and he comes back and he says, "You're the good son." I said, "Well, I try to be." So he said, and he comes up with this fake British accent, and he's going, "Kneeleth before me." And I'm kneeling, and he takes his hiking pole and he taps me on each shoulder, and he says, "From hence this day forward, in the land of the Appalachian Trail, you should be known as Sundance, he who dances with the mountains to honor the Father." And I thought, wow, that's a great trail name.
It's a perfect trail name.
And then they splashed. I had to take a hit of Jack Daniels or something, and they splashed a little Jack Daniels over me, and that was my trail name. And I thought, wow. And it paid off well down the trail, because when I got into Damascus, my wife was coming down to see me to spend the weekend. And I stopped off at this bed and breakfast just to make sure all the plans were set. and there was these couples in the bed at the bed and breakfast eating breakfast. Of course, the lady that ran it offered me breakfast, and no through hiker is going to turn down breakfast.
True that.
And then the couple started asking me about the hike, and then the one lady asked me about my trail name, and I said, "He who dances with the mountains to honor the Father." And she said, "Do you mean your heavenly Father or earthly Father?"
Great
and I thought,
question.
boy, here's the quiz. I said,
Yeah.
both. Bingo. So this woman, it was Judy and her husband, I think his name was Mike. She asked if she could pray over me. So we got in a prayer circle with this other couple, and the woman that owned the bed and breakfast, and she prayed, and it brought tears to my eyes. I never had that kind of experience. And then she left, and then she came back, and she said, "Paul," she said, "do you mind if I ask you a personal question?" I said, "No." She said, "Do you think that you might get Alzheimer's because your dad had Alzheimer's?" And I said, "Well," I said, "it crossed my mind." And then she said, "Do you mind if I pray over you again?" I said, "No," because I'm thinking, prayers are like, money in the bank here. You never have enough. So she put her hands on my head, and she started praying, and tears just flowed down my face. I literally wept. She's saying, by the blood of the cross, dear God, may you wipe this disease from Paul and his family. And it was like, wow, what an emotional moment. So when we got done, I'm wiping tears from my face, and she left, and she came back a few minutes later and handed me a check for $200 for Herm's hike at the Alzheimer's Association. And it was like, whoa, that was probably another one of the most emotional moments on the trail.
Yes.
Be involved in prayer like that.
It's surprising how much people were wanting to care for you like that. The Appalachian Trail, it's a long hike, but there are so many great people along the way, both the other hikers, although not all, and just the people that are put in your path like that.
It becomes an extended family. And I think one of the ends I had was when I told people that I was hiking as a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association. They kind of like a calling card and opened a few doors for me. I think people at times went out of the way to be a little more generous or charitable or compassionate to me because, I was doing this to raise money for a worthy cause. And then
to honor your father.
A lot of the people that I had met had their lives, their families had been touched by Alzheimer's. So, we shared the common pain there. And that was, whoa, that it really hit home. It really hit home to me. And it was heartfelt. These people, they were just amazing people. And we had that instant connection just through this dreaded disease.
It is a horrible disease, as you well know. And, I lost a parent to Parkinsonian dementia 5 years ago. And my other parent is in the hospital with what they believe to be Alzheimer's. She had genetic testing, didn't have the markers like decades ago before they had really, I think, identified the plaques as clearly as they have now. But it's just horrible. And, her dad had it and died from complications. Her brother has it. It's totally genetically passed, as well as, whatever the causation is that they don't know yet, it just shows up randomly sometimes too. And I have to tell you that if it hadn't crossed your mind already, then I'm glad that they prayed over you with that, brought it up and prayed over you with that, because that was such a personal protection. I think you needed that.
And that wasn't the only time that I had people pray with me. In Virginia, there was this brand new shelter, like a 3-story thing. If it would have had plumbing and electric, it would have been a nice house, right?
No doubt. Are you talking about that castle or that mansion?
No, this was in Virginia where I met Circuit Rider.
Okay, yes.
That was
a cool guy.
There was a sick hiker in the shelter, and no one wanted to go in. And I was standing around, and his friends were there, and I said, "Look," I said, "go back there. There's a road." I said, and they're going, "Oh, no, we'll be all right." And then this older gentleman who was younger than me, and I guess he had his sidekick or partner, so he's talking with this guy's friends, and then he comes in and introduces himself, and he says, "I'm Circuit Rider, and this is Sherlock." And I said, "Oh, man of the cloth, huh?" And he said, "Not too many people pick up on that." I said, "Reverend," I watched all the Clint Eastwood westerns. I said, "I know what a Circuit Rider
Hey, I'm clued in. Absolutely.
So he was a Methodist minister from up in the Michigan area, and he had a ministry on the trail every summer where he would tend to the needs of hikers, whether it be physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs. And his Sherlock was his youth leader. So, they were asking me, about what I was doing on hiking. I told them, about the Alzheimer's, and I was telling them how my mother was struggling with her faith because this disease rocked my mother's faith to its foundations because she could not understand how God could let something happen like this to such a good man. And then Circuit Rider, we got the people together and we prayed again. And he called on God, the great physician, to heal my mother's emotional wounds. And here it was, the faucets turned on again.
Right. Absolutely.
And I ran into Circuit Rider and Sherlock a couple of times as we headed north because they would get on and off the trail at various points, and stay with friends or different churches. And it was a great emotional, I would say spiritual aid to meet up with and hike at times with the Circuit Rider and Sherlock.
My favorite was when they pulled up behind you on the road. That was funny.
Yeah, I was hiking into this town to meet my wife. It was in New Jersey, and it was the last time I would see her until I got to Maine. And it was one of them days where it's like 90 degrees, the humidity's 90 degrees, and I'm walking on this black asphalt highway, and it's morning rush hour, and cars are zipping by me, and I'm thinking, I don't feel like walking 4 miles in this. So I turn around, I start walking, I hear this beep, 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 and I look, and behind me there's this car, this convertible, and I hear this, "Sundance, get in, we'll give you a ride," and it was Circuit Rider. His mother had lived in that town in New Jersey where I was meeting my wife. So how about that for a small world story?
Things work out the way they're supposed to.
Yes.
Every time. I think that he was one of my favorite characters that you met along the trail. Who are some of the guy with the weed? That guy was funny. But you met so many people, and it became like a trail family, even though y'all weren't, people would leave, like you would leave to go and meet Kathy and come back, and you went to see your dad and came back, and people would come and go, but it was still people that were through hikers were there to be together. It seemed like it was just a draw. Like the groups were meant to come in contact, and interesting to me.
The number of people I met, I still keep in touch with some of them, and this has been years down the road. That's the kind of bond that we formed out there on the trail.
Who are some of the ones that you're the most close to?
You want one of the funniest stories?
I do.
Okay, I was up in Pennsylvania, they call it Rocksylvania, where hiking boots go to die because it just the rocks.
I loved that.
So
that alone was funny.
I was headed toward Delaware Gap, and there was a hostel in the church. So this was early morning, and I was hiking with two ladies, Graham Cracker and Rockamimi were their names. And Rockamimi, her dad had passed away from Alzheimer's also. So we had a very tearful, emotional hike that day. So they went ahead of me, and I'm at this road, and there was a town down the road, and I thought, boy, I could really go for an egg sandwich and a fresh cup of coffee or a bagel with a cream cheese. So I'm just standing there, and this car rides by, and the guy slams on his brakes, and it was like one of those lowrider cars,
Yes.
And the guy backs up. He's got, these necklaces, and it was a black guy in the car with his hair's in braids, right? And he says, "You need a ride?" And he's got, rap music blaring on the stereo. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I want to ride with this guy or not, right? So I said, "Nah," I said, "I think I'll just head on down the trail." And he said, "What's wrong?" He said, "You think because I'm a black man, and I'm going to kidnap and rob you and leave you for dead?" And I said, I didn't know what to say with this guy, right? He's like, I'm thinking, man, this guy's getting confrontational. This is the last thing I need. And then he goes, I said, "Nah," I said, "I think it's the music." And he looks at me and he's starting to smile. He says, "It'd be my luck." He said, "Guy I'll offer a ride to has got to be some honky redneck white cracker." And he said, "I guess you want to hear something like Willie Nelson, right?" He reaches in his glove compartment, pulls out a Willie Nelson CD and starts playing On the Road again. This gentleman's name was Glennie T. And he was the founder and leader of a group called 14 Karat Soul. They were an a cappella group that they appeared a number of times on the Muppets. I mean, these guys opened up, they toured Europe, Japan. They opened up for a number of big name acts. And when he did that, I said, "All right, take me into town for breakfast." So we get into town for breakfast, and he brings me back to the trail. And then we're talking, and I said to him, we were talking about music, right? Since this guy, he's a professional musician. I said, when I was in high school for my senior prom, we had the Delphonics play at the senior prom. He's going, "Wow." I said, then afterwards, we went to this nightclub where they had the Dells. He's going, "That's amazing." He said, "You ought to change your name from Sundance to Soul Dance." He says, I said, "Well, how about giving me some?" And so we sang a couple verses of My Girl by the Temptations. And after we got done, he just got in the car, put the Willie Nelson tape back in his stereo player, and headed down the road and disappeared down the road.
On the road again.
Yeah, and I thought, man, that the old adage, never judge a book by its cover. I mean, this guy was intimidating when he first stopped because, but then, what a great story it was. What a nice guy.
It was a great story. And, that just goes toward prejudging, because if you had just quit talking to him, just gotten confrontational back or something, then you would never have had a friend.
Glennie T was his name.
Well, and then I hope he reads your book.
And I mentioned this to my daughters, and they said, "Oh yeah, Dad, we used to see his group on the Muppets all the time when we watched them when we were small." I said, "Well, I met the leader of the group."
There you go. We have to take a break. Believe it or not, we're at our last break. This has gone by so quickly. So, y'all, we're going to take this little break, and we will be right back. I hope you come back too, and we will catch you on the flip side.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello, I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to the final segment of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I'm Kat, your host, with my guest, Paul Travers. Paul has written a fantastic book, Dancing with the Mountains, Alzheimer's Angels, and the Appalachian Trail, a spiritual journey of spirit. And I'm so sorry. I just did not write that down. But I'm a huge fan. I'm going to just tell you. I love this book. I think that anybody who is, interested in the Appalachian Trail, and that's a lot of people. It's a big dream, a big goal. A lot of people have it. Anyone who has dealt with loved ones with Alzheimer's. Anyone who just wants to experience a lot of what real life hiking on the Appalachian Trail is like. This book reaches out to a lot of different experiences people would have. And I think that that's why it spoke to me, because I've always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail. I turned 60 this year, so I better hurry up. I know that there were they're very young or they're very old. There doesn't seem to be a lot of in the middle with the hikers that you mentioned. And yeah, you were retired when you started doing it.
Yes.
So it's a dream that people can achieve even at their later points in their lives. I think that makes a big difference too.
Because I tell people, if it wasn't for the fact that I was through hiking to raise money for the Alzheimer's Association, I would have probably did half the trail one year and come back, didn't half the trail the next year, a prolonged section hike or a through hike with a prolonged 0 months, whatever you want to call it. But that, for all the hikers, that's the way to do it. And when I finished, I still had what they call white blaze fever, because white blazes on the 2x6 inch white blazes on the trail mark the route. And for 5 years, I hiked with a group out of Nashville called the Nashville Backpackers. And the leader of that group, he was the original Rain Man. His name was Raymond Myers. What a gentleman he was. Back in, it was 2017 or 18, he had finally finished section hiking the Appalachian Trail after 15 years.
Wow.
And then a year or two later, I got an email from his daughter saying that the Rain Man had passed away. And that, he accomplished his dream. But little did people know that, he was dying from cancer. And it kind of really hit home, because we were the same age.
Right.
And I had so much fun hiking with this group, section hiking for about 5 years that, I did considerable amount of the trail again just by hiking with these guys and gals.
how fun to have met that man and his friends. How did you connect with the Nashville Hikers?
There's a website called whiteblaze.org, and and there's a kind of meetup section, where people say, I'm looking for a hiking group or looking for hikers, and he had a little blurb on there, Nashville backpackers will be hiking this section of the Appalachian Trail. Anybody interested, contact me or so-and-so. And that's how we hooked up. And it like I said, I was very saddened when he passed away, because I was hoping to do some more hiking with him, because he was the founder of the Nashville Backpackers.
Well, I'm glad that you had the chance to enjoy the friendship that you had while you had him there. That's so special. Yeah, those connections are awesome, right?
Yes. Because the people that I met on the trail at the very end, when I was kind of, analyzing my hike, I come to the conclusion that, we're all connected in this world, in this life. We are just spiritual beings having an earthly experience or existence. And I used this to comfort my mother when she was dying, because, she was always just about something. Why does God let something bad happen to such a good man as my father? And I said, we're here for a purpose, Mom. I said, most of us don't know what it is. I said, maybe when we pass the other side, we will find out what that purpose is. But rest assured, we're here for a purpose, and we're not necessarily here for ourselves. We're here for somebody else. I said, when my father was in a nursing home, I said, Dad's here for a reason. I said, I don't know if it's someone in the family, whether it's a visitor that comes through the door, whether it's someone at the nursing staff, but he is here for a reason. He will be touching somebody's life. And I think that gave my mother some comfort in her last days.
I hope it did, because it's very true. I feel that it's very true. I kiddingly said when you were talking about something else that everything happens the way it's supposed to. And even if we can't see the message coming through it, or we think that it's just too hurtful, there can't possibly be a positive relevant to whatever is happening. I still honestly believe that everything happens the way it's supposed to, and there's a lesson in everything. It may not be my lesson or yours, but like you told your mom, he's touching someone. And I think that's why we're here. That's why we are on the paths that we are. You had a big path.
I agree wholeheartedly, because there's a section of the book where, when I was in between hiking years and I went out to Montana for a wedding, and I stopped at the Crazy Horse Monument, and I met Ed McGaugh, who was a Marine Corps fighter pilot, and I was also a fellow Marine, so we bonded there. And he was a Lakota medicine man. And how many minutes do we have? This is probably a good story to end the show, Wanda.
You got 7, and you just roll with that.
Okay. My wife and I, we were going to this wedding in Billings, Montana. So we were playing tourists. So we stopped off at the Crazy Horse Monument, and there was in this center, there was a table set up, and there was Native Americans selling crafts and stuff. And then there was this table with books. And of course, being an author, I went up to the table and I'm looking at the books. And the gentleman behind the table, I'm looking at the picture, and I said, "You're Ed McGaugh." He said, "Yes, I am." So, I said, "Semper Fi." So we started talking mainly about books. And then he asked, he says, "Well, where are you headed?" And I said, "Well, you're headed for a wedding." Then he asked me, he said, "Well, where are you going? Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, we've been to, my wife and I, we stopped at Wounded Knee, the site of the Wounded Knee massacre on Pine Ridge reservations, and we did some other Indian sites." And And he says, "You're not one of these Wasichus pretendians, are you?" And I said, Wasichu was, like a white man in Lakota. Yes. And I said, no. I said, no, I'm not a pretendian. I said, I'm not trying to steal your culture. And then we got talking. He says, "What's your trail name?" And I said, "Sundance." And he was really getting irritated. He said, "Oh, you mean like the sacred Sundance ceremony?" And then it dawned on me, oh my gosh, my trail name has another double meaning, because I remember the Sundance ceremony from that movie, A Man Called Horse, with Richard Harris.
Yes.
Back in the early 70s. And I said, no, Ed. I said, here's what it is. I said, modern man's trying to connect with God. I said, I believe that we can enhance our relationship through the divinity of nature. And I said, that's the legacy of your people. And that really touched him. Because then he leans over and he looks at me and he says, "Paul," he said, "you're not on a vacation." He said, "You're on a spiritual journey."
Yeah.
And then he said a prayer over me in Lakota. And that, that had my eyes tearing up. And then his comment was, always embrace the mystery of life.
That's beautiful.
He says, there's some things that can't explain. He said, in our culture, he said, we accept that as the mystery from the Creator. And I thought, wow, yeah, we don't have to have everything explained to us. There's things in life that we can never explain or have explained. And that's okay. Just, we have to accept the mystery of life. And that's what the American Native culture and religions do.
Well, I will tell you that that's one of the most beautiful things that as humans we have the chance to do. Yeah, I'm not one of those people that wants answers. Well, I do want answers. But I also recognize that that's the truth. You're not going to always get the answers. That's why there is faith. And it's okay just to roll with that. I'm so glad you got to meet him.
It was then I knew this was a spiritual journey, and then I knew I had to go back on the trail, because it was such a profound experience meeting Ed McGod that I still talk about it with friends, because they said, "You met a Lakota medicine man?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "This guy was the real deal." I said, "Make no mistake about this."
How amazing. How amazing. That is such a great story. You're right. That was perfect. I'm so glad you shared. Actually, I'm glad you shared everything, because this has been a terrific show, and you're a terrific writer.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that.
And then for your listeners that are interested and might become readers, it was through Ed McGod that I got the sacred stone that I placed on Mount Katahdin. And I'll save that story for the book and the readers.
Absolutely. And again, you can find Paul's books on his website, www.paultravers, 3 W's, .paultravers.com. You can also find his books on Amazon. Just look him up. And thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad you were here. And like I said, I'm looking forward to the Day of Infamy. That's going to be my next one. So I just love that you honor your family so much through your writing. It matters.
It's been an honor. It's kind of way, Sundance honors the father, the good son.
Yeah.
That brings a smile to my face.
Well, brings a smile to mine too, because that's a pretty darn cool experience to have that be what came out as your trail name. And with that explanation too. Even if you didn't feel like you were dancing through those mountains all the time. The AT will make you remember, right? But
yes, it will.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, and thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. This was great. For all of those who are listening, whether you're listening through our archives or listening to us live, and if you're looking for archives, they're on iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, you name it, we're there. And thank you so much. I think that you will find that this show has been just a real joyful journey for me, and I hope it is for you too. And we will catch you next week on the next episode of Fate Magazine Radio. Y'all have a great week. Don't forget, if you don't like the world you're looking at, you can fix that. All you have to do is be the change. Meet people's eyes. Smile. If you're in a mask, then your eyes will light up and you will bring about a smile from someone else, or maybe you'll just uplift someone that needed it. Whatever works for you, you just rock being that change. Make the world a better place, even if it's just your street corner. So we will see you next week. Same cat time, same cat channel, and just remember, there's always the strange and unusual out there. It's fate. Good night.